The king in the north!
Jacaerys.
I will hurt you for this.
I am the sword in the darkness.
Lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
Let me give you some advice, bastard.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
What is up, everybody? Jeremy Eisenfire here, and welcome back to part 3 of Dissecting the Dance, a multi-part series where we will be taking a deep dive into every dragon battle that takes place during the Dance of the Dragons. And of course, if you missed part 1, the battle above Shipbreaker Bay, or if you missed part 2, the battle above Rooks Rest, both of those videos will be available in the description below. The Battle of the Gullet is the third major dragon battle in the Dance of the Dragons, and quite possibly the bloodiest naval battle in the history of Westeros, which causes heavy losses on both the Blacks and the Green side by the time it is over. At this point in time, the Dance of the Dragons is well underway, and what started off as a simple dynastic dispute has morphed into a full-blown war of fire and blood. Starting, of course, with the death of Jacaerys Velaryon above the Battle of Shipbreaker Bay, continued in the tragic Blood and Cheese event, and then of course continued even further in the battle above Rooks Rest. After suffering multiple losses at the hands of the Blacks, the Greens' Hand of the King, Otto Hightower, hatches one final plan to get the upper hand in the war, by reaching out to a very old enemy of Daemon Targaryens from down in the Stepstones, the Triarchy, with the hopes of breaking the Velaryon blockade that has been formed around the Gullet. And luckily enough for Otto, the Triarchy accepted his offer and sent 90 warships en route to the Gullet. Meanwhile, back on Dragonstone, with the war continuing to heat up after the death of Jacaerys Velaryon, Jace thought it would be best, in order to protect his two youngest brothers, to send them over to Pentos in order to foster under a Pentoshi prince, until such a time where Rhaenyra has secured the Iron Throne and they can safely bring them back. So the two princes departed Dragonstone, in the company of 7 different warships sent by Corlys Velaryon for their protection. Unfortunately for the two princes, however, they end up sailing directly into the oncoming Triarchy's fleet, and the ship gets captured. Young Viserys, having no means of escape, being in the possession of only a dragon egg at the time, tries to pass himself off as just another ship's mate, but is quickly discovered. Aegon the Younger, on the other hand, managed to escape on the back of his dragon, Stormcloud, but the dragon takes a good amount of scorpion bolts and crossbow bolts on its departure. Fortunately enough for Aegon the Younger, he makes it all the way back to Dragonstone, but Stormcloud unfortunately perishes due to his wounds. Then, on the 5th day of the new year in 130 AC, the battle officially begins, with the Triarchy's commander, Shakaro Lothar, dividing the Triarchy's ships into 2 different squadrons, entering the Gullet from the north and the south of Dragonstone, surprising the Velaryon's fleet in the process. After hearing of the threat and of his brother's capture, Jacaerys Velaryon gathers the Dragonseeds and prepares for battle, giving the Dragonseeds their first chance to prove themselves worthy of their dragons. After the battle above Rooks Rest, and with Rhaenyra being a little too weak to fly at this point, the Blacks were in desperate need of some new dragon riders. At which point, Jace and Rhaenyra offered a lordship to any of the Targaryen bastards living on Dragonstone who managed to claim any of the untrained dragons. And if you want to learn more about the Dragonseeds, check out my Meet the Dragonseeds video that will be linked down in the description. But after many failed attempts, a few of the Targaryen bastards managed to claim dragons, giving Jace some much-needed backup in the Battle of the Gullet. Flying Vermax into battle, Jacaerys met the Triarchy fleet head-on and began burning their ships one at a time, then was joined by Ulf the White on Silverwing, Nettles on Sheepstaler, Adam Velaryon on the back of Seasmoke, and Hugh Hammer on Vermithor. And the Dragonseeds quickly proved their worth in battle, having shattered the line of ships from the Free Cities. Unfortunately for Jace and the Dragon Riders, however, things were not over quite yet. And with the soldiers of the Triarchy being very much adapted to fighting Dragon Lords after all of their time warring with Prince Daemon down in the Stepstones, things were about to take a tragic turn. Possibly wounded from a crossbow bolt to the eye, Vermax flew a little too close to the sea and crashed, leaving the dragon struggling to get free as he was tangled in the rigging of a burning galley, and as the ship sank, Vermax sank along with it. Prince Jacaerys, however, managed to leap free from the dragon before hitting the sea, but unfortunately for him, he landed in the middle of a bunch of Myrish crossbowmen, who reportedly unloaded a flurry of arrows into the prince, killing him instantly. After the death of Prince Jacaerys, the battle continued to wage well into the night. As the Triarchy was leaving, they bypassed the island of Dragonstone, believing that it was too strong to assault head-on, but instead they attacked the island of Driftmark, setting fire to the city of Spicetown, sacking the town and butchering its inhabitants. High Tide and all of the treasures that Lord Corlys Velaryon had accrued over his many different 9 voyages were burned by the Myrish and Tyroshi soldiers on their way out, with the Sea Snake servants being cut down as they fled. After the dust cleared, thousands had died in the battle, and the town of Spicetown was never rebuilt, with the Velaryon fleet losing over a third of its strength. And of course, the heavy toll that Rhaenyra paid as well, losing another one of her sons, her heir in Jacaerys Velaryon, and with her other son, Viserys Targaryen, still being a captive of the Triarchy. And young Aegon the Younger never quite forgave himself for abandoning his little brother. Back on Dragonstone, it was reported that Hugh the Hammer and Ulf the White celebrated their participation in the Battle of the Gullet, calling themselves true knights now, while Nettles and Adam Velaryon were heavily affected by the war. And at this point, many of the inhabitants of Dragonstone came to resent Queen Rhaenyra after losing so many of their kin during the battle. The Battle of the Gullet was also considered a disaster by the Triarchy as well, having only 28 of their 90 ships returning home. And eventually, the leaders of the Triarchy would begin to squabble among themselves, which would ultimately lead to the Daughters' War. And the young captured Targaryen prince was eventually sold to the Magister of Lys. After all was said and done, both sides suffered heavy losses, with Prince Viserys' capture and Prince Lucerys being killed. But ultimately, the Greens failed in their attempt to smash the blockade that the Velaryons held. And with the Greens' allies in the Free Cities taking such heavy losses, they would no longer take any part in the war going forward. Overall, the Battle of the Gullet is widely known as the bloodiest naval battle to ever take place in the history of Westeros. And of course, with heavy losses being incurred on both sides, it was a war that neither side would forget for a very long time. Rhaenyra, however, would become very hardened after Jacaerys' death. The death of her first son, Lucerys, during the battle above Shipbreaker Bay, nearly broke her, having her almost ending the war entirely. But seeing the death of her firstborn son and heir in Jacaerys only seemed to strengthen Rhaenyra's resolve going forward, almost like she felt she had nothing to lose after this point. But there you have it, folks, part 3 of my Dissecting the Dance series, where we will be diving into every dragon battle that takes place during the Dance of the Dragons. And you can catch part 1 and part 2 down in the description below. But that is going to do it for us today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit a like on your way out, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications to stay up to date on all of our upcoming content, as we will be covering all things House of the Dragon and A Song of Ice and Fire. And as always, I want to give a big thank you to everybody out there for watching, and we will see you on the next one.